Thanks everyone for tuning in to Night Terrors Radio. We've got a special night lined up for you. We have our guest Hart Fisher. We're talking all things Jeffrey Dahmer, the Big Book of Dahmer tonight. How are you doing, Hart?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm having a lot of fun with this project.
It's been a little while since we've talked, and obviously a lot has happened.
Yeah.
And a lot has happened in, I don't know if we would call it the Dahmer-verse. So can you kind of lead me through sort of the genesis of what was going on with the book originally and where we are now with it?
All right. So for those at home who don't know, hi, I'm Hart Fisher. I was the publisher at Boneyard Press, and we were an outlaw comics publisher in the 90s and in the early part of the 2000s. And we never started off with the idea of being an outlaw comics publisher. It's just I liked underground comics, and I loved Mad Magazine, and I was a Marvel maniac, and I loved all the indies that had come out, First Comics, and I was a ravenous reader, and I was a big fan of Stephen King and Clive Barker and John Skip and Craig Spector. So I was an omnivore for entertainment. So when I came to do my comic books, I was kind of looking to do books that I didn't see on the shelf. And so I ended up doing a book about Jeffrey Dahmer. I had done lots of research in my past on serial killers growing up in Chicago, being the home of John Wayne Gacy. And that was the boogeyman of my youth. You know, that was the guy that was in all the news. Steve Dahl and Gary Meyer, you know, had Steve Dahl got into trouble in Chicago for his rendition of The Wall from Pink Floyd with All in All, it's just another kid in the crawl. So I grew up with these kinds of shock comedians and Saturday Night Live and Monty Python. So in this wellspring of true crime, my father had a big library of true crime books, and I'm a child of divorce, and so I go to Dad's on the weekend, and sometimes it was a little boring, but he had those Time Life books to read, so you could read all about the JFK assassination or Al Capone or what have you. And so when it came time for my buddy to go, hey man, you should do a Jeffrey Dahmer comic book. And this is 1991 when he said this to me. It was my friend at North Star, Dan Matson, childhood friend, junior high, high school, and his company, North Star, published Faust. So I was doing my comics, Dark Angel, Bill the Bull. We had published Rectum Erectum, I believe, by this point, and he gave me the idea to do a Jeffrey Dahmer biography. And I thought, okay, I didn't like the way the guy was being portrayed in the media. I thought they were sensationalizing the crime. So I did a no-nonsense, bare-bones, black and white comic book about it, and I went through a lot of hell with the media. And long story short, I got sued by the victims' families. I spent time in court. I mean, their lawsuit was completely nothing more than it was meritless, and it was just nothing more than harassment. And they were looking to sell. If you go online, you could see me on Larry King, and it'll go into more detail about that kind of thing. And some of the conflicts I had with these guys. I was on Jerry Springer, Sally Jesse Raphael. And here's the thing about those shows is there's a lot of time for you to spend with these people backstage. And I would see these ladies and these mothers and these distraught victims' families. I would run in and we'd be talking backstage. We had, you know, they knew about my girlfriend getting murdered, and, you know, they knew that I was a victim of violent crime. I discussed it with them backstage, you know, and it's the thing that never made it onto the show because the shows want conflict. And so I find that it's weird. It's 30 years later, and we've got this hit Netflix special, and they did it on Dahmer, and they completely sensationalized the crimes and completely dragged me into the story, and I didn't know anything about it. This summer I had a cancer scare. I had a big growth in my back. So I kind of had a really bad cancer scare right before this came out, and I got really sick this summer. And it affected my health really, really good. I would be breaking out of these cold sweats at the drop of a hat, you know, and it turned out I had like a big infected cyst. It got really big. You know, and really red, and it was nasty. And luckily it was just a cyst, you know, and we were able to take care of that, and I got all cleaned out and healed up. But that really knocks you out, and it saps all your energy. And I had decided this summer that I was going to not do this year's American Horror Film Festival. I've got 5 years of them. You know, you're an alumni.
Mhm.
multi-alumni of the American Horror Film Fest.
Yeah.
And in fact, your movie won Best Mockumentary of the fifth American Horror Film Festival. And so I decided I needed to focus on getting these comics done. I had a buildable Kickstarter, and it was turned out to be a very difficult project. We had all kinds of floods in the New Order Fulfillment Center. This summer has been crazy. Top of the health scare, and dealing with my mother has passed, and that's been a very difficult emotional journey.
Yeah.
And so the Netflix special came hot on the heels of it. Totally blindsided me. I had no idea my work was going to be included in this series. I didn't know it was in development. I had no idea it was ever going to come out. And so it was like, what the, huh? What the, again? What, why am I even being brought up? You know what I mean? Why are they even bringing my comic books into this? What is this about?
Right.
Like, it's been 30 years. It's been 30 years. God damn it. Why are you throwing me under the bus again? God damn it. So I'm like, shit. And of course, they're doing the same lies and the same misrepresentations, and they're mischaracterizing my work. And they photoshopped the covers and altered the covers, and they didn't get any permission from me. And I'm an
Right.
entertainment professional, and in this business, they should have gotten a release from me for this,
Oh, yeah.
and it would have just been the professional thing to do. And I've signed lots of releases on these books to appear in lots of properties, including Nat Geo's The 90s, The Last Great Generation. Oh, yes, I'm in part 3.
And we were even watching the show, my wife and and I mean, the cover, because especially from someone who reads comics, someone who was involved with comics, it's not just a random cover. That cover is an extremely recognizable cover.
Yes.
So
I,
you're
I would,
watching it. There's no way that it is not a reflection of your product.
correct, without a doubt. And I believe it misrepresents my product completely. And it's also does the artist who did that work a deep disservice, because that man is an uber talented Russian artist. Uh, Went to college in Moscow, worked on Russian television, was a professor over at the University of Illinois. I'm not sure if he was a professor there, but he went on to become a professor,
Mm.
and he was working with the professor when I was learning printmaking and etching, with copper plates. And so
Right.
Eric, that's when I first met Eric, and he was the mad Russian genius, and he could paint Renaissance paintings and tweak them a little bit for fun. And so it was an amazing thing to get that artist to do that iconic cover. And it's part of why the Jeffrey is misspelled, is because Eric is Russian. And it was painted, and we were up against the wall on the deadline. I'm like, well, you know what? It's a beautiful cover. We'll live with it. It's art. It's art, my friends. So to that man went through a lot of hardship in Russia. He dealt with a lot of stuff to get his family out of Soviet Union Russia. And I had a tremendous amount of respect for Eric. And that's why Eric is the one that drew the sequel, Young Jeffrey Dahmer, which is an insane, like, Russian underground comic version of this, and the adventures of young Jeffrey Dahmer and his buddy Danny Quayle.
Mm.
And then we go into Dahmer Zombie Squad, and Eric did the cover for that. And then we did Dahmer versus Jesus Christ, or Jeffrey Dahmer versus Jesus Christ, the ultimate slugfest in history. And that was really all about the end of the world, and Dahmer was like the Antichrist, and Jesus came back for the second coming. And it's a really funny book. It's a really damn, it's very, if you like Mad Magazine, Crack Magazine, Crazy Magazine, Not Brand Etch, in living color, if you like that kind of insane, especially like Naked Gun or
Hmm.
Top Secret, those
Yeah.
kinds of spoof movies with gag after gag, Airplane, which I love. It's very much in that kind of vein. And so I knew these books weren't what they were portraying in these shows, but they needed a villain. So they had to manufacture a villain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They had to
Oh, yeah.
manufacture one. That's kind of what they did. They kind of manufactured me as a villain, and they kept the narrative going with me as a villain. And the need to Photoshop these books, I think it's an attempt to kind of like whitewash history, like
Hmm.
to make it theirs. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
kidnap it without really paying for it, because my people and I, we paid for it. Do you get what I mean by that? We really
Well, yeah.
we went, whoa, sorry, there comes my light. Thank you. Hold on. But we really went through a lot. Oh, hey, Rainbow Bright. Rainbow bright, it's rainbow bright. We went through a lot, me and my family and my friends.
Yeah.
We really had to deal with a lot of insanity because of this misrepresentation of my work. And my family suffered. My father was called a piece of shit live on Jerry Springer. It's one of those things that was a very difficult period for my life. So when Netflix did this, and the producers of the Monster Dahmer series, and of course they're ripping off Monster, the Eileen Wermo story, of course,
Hmm.
with Charlize Theron, with a fantastic performance by Charlize Theron, fantastic, great serial killer film. Uh, so to me, it was a total blindside, but I think they kind of meant it that way. You know what I
Now,
mean? So it
when
pushed. What do you think?
well, this is what interests me too is that when the book was originally produced, and when we first saw a lot of media take it and run with it and sort of choose this own sort of narrative they had, what do you think they wanted the book to be? 'Cause
Oh, they
you sort of talked about
wanted
what
to
it was.
be.
What do you think they wanted it to be?
I know what they wanted it to be because what they would do, like the first one to do this was Faith Daniels. I was on the show called A Closer Look with Faith Daniels. It was the first show I was on. I was right out of college, and I was a bouncer at a bar. And I'd never had any media experience like this before ever in my life. And nobody in my
Right.
family did. It was a complete like blindside. And all of a sudden I'm being interviewed for TV and being attacked stuff for local news reporters and such. And watching the way they would use my story for whatever narrative they were selling at the moment. Oh, he's so outrageous, he's terrible. Oh, artist loses lawsuit, First Amendment issue. And they would just bat me back and forth. He's a good guy, he's a bad guy, he's a piece of shit. He's all right, he's an artist struggling for the First Amendment. I hate the First Amendment. And they just kind of batted it around for whatever could keep them making money. I mean, that's what it's really all about. And so they
Yeah.
needed a bad guy. Dahmer's in prison, and at a certain point, Dahmer was dead, and these victims' families, and I, as a victim of violent crime, understand what it's like when the person that murdered your loved one, that raped your loved one, is out of your reach. There's no getting it back. There's no revenge. There's no payback. And you just have to move on with your life. That's the only way you can handle it. And so they needed somebody. They needed a focus point, a villain. And I'm a blonde haired, blue eyed man. I mean, my hair is a little darker now, guys. I'm in the wilds of Wisconsin now, so I'm not getting all that California sun. But they needed a villain, and I was young and I was brash, and I fit their bill. I had long blonde hair. It was right after the whole PMRC stuff and all the threats of rap. Oh no, gangster rap. Oh no.
And I mean, and this was still sort of on the tail end of, what we now call satanic panic.
Yes.
So anyone that had long hair, black clothing, anything representative of metal music was instantly lumped into a category of, and it wasn't as if, we sort of weren't, social rebels or participating in our own brand of rebellion, but I think they wanted that rebellion to be a disrespect of all things they held valuable, and would go to any length to make someone representative of that, because it just validated everything they thought was wrong with something that wasn't mainstream back then.
And it was easy for them to be like, who is this young punk? Who is this little asshole? Who does this guy think he is? And at that point in time in my life, I mean, I knew I'd accomplished a lot in my life at that point in time. I knew I had
Right.
worked hard to achieve my goals. I was a good student in school. You know what I mean? I honored my father and my mother. I had a good relationship with my father and my mother. I mean, my mom and I fought the most. We fought tooth and nail a lot, but that happens. And but eventually we became really tight, especially in the last like 20 years of her life. We really became close and good friends. And she became a real valuable ally and a really good person to go to for advice. And she had worked in the Department of Public Aid in Illinois since 1969. So I had an awareness of what it was like for a lot of these people in the Randolph Taylor homes, because my
Mhm.
mother was a welfare lady and she worked with single moms, and she would do the welfare checks and go there, you know. She would go to these places. So I grew up with an awareness of this. I come from a multi-race family. You know, my step grandmother was black. My uncle Norman was black, and I loved them. They were great. They were great people. And but when the Dahmer thing hit and they portrayed me as this evil, racist, misogynist, blah blah blah, whatever bad guy label you could throw on metalhead guy. Look at that metal guy. Look at it. He
Oh
looks
yeah.
like an evil metal guy. Just look at that guy. You just
Right.
know,
Yeah.
you know. So it was like central typecasting, and I was smart, and I could give him a good fight. I could give him a good argument. So that meant I'd put on a good show, because when you're backstage at these talk shows, that's what they want. They're telling you, the producers are back. They're telling you, we want you to stick to your guns. What's your point of view? They wanted to know what the conflict was so they could drive it. And you're the straw man. You're the wicker man. You're the guy that's going to burn in the straw, and the whole village go, yay, yay, another year of good crops.
Right. Yeah. And I think also there's just this, there's this constant need for, and I mean, we're experiencing it today to the upteenth degree, but even back then, and I don't think that they really had a sort of a framework for what it was and what it was capable of being. But back then, it was still this idea of being content starved. And once they get this story that it has any kind of drive, it's like we have to keep it going. And
Mm-hmm.
when you've got a serial killer that's no longer killing, well, now we've got to bring another participant. Now we've got another character.
Yeah.
It's this ongoing sort of operatic, like we take a brief break, but how much more can we squeeze out of it? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that, if they can bring someone else in and say, okay, we've got a level of animosity towards this guy and what he's done. Let's get more animosity. Look what this guy's done now.
Yeah. I
You know,
think some
and
of it is trying to take a piss on the American Horrors channel. American Horrors is a direct competitor to Netflix. And guys, ladies and gentlemen, I think my American Horrors and American Horrors Classic, free to watch, thank you, free to watch with no commercial interruptions during your feature film, except for Riffhead. Riffhead is more like Mystery Science Theater 3000, but we're totally free. We've been doing this since, God, we signed our first American Horrors TV contract in like 2008. And so we've been doing
mhm,
this a long time. That's how Billie Eilish was involved. That's why, like right now, all week, we're playing okay, Billie Eilish grew up next door to me in Los Angeles. And so I'm her first director, especially her first horror director. And so she's one of the little girls you see in the early promos that are on like YouTube, and it says evil girls, evil boys. Those are my neighbor's kids. And I always like that. I always like involving all the local talent in town.
right,
And
yeah,
Billy Finney's parents were actors and an actress, and they were talented. Their parents were both really talented. Patrick is a very talented actor in his own right. He's good. And around the corner, the father of the boys, Peter, was working for, I think it was, God, I can't remember the name of the online, Mr. Spank, I think it was, one of those pervy sites. But Peter's a
yeah,
punk rock guy, and Peter's an amazing painter. And it's his boys, Ira. And God, I'm going to brain fart on the other guy. Damn it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Peter. Sorry, buddy. But his kids were great. They had the Mohawks. So if you see the little kids running with mohawks and hitting a guy in the head with a hammer, that's Peter's
yeah,
boys. And they did a great job. They're fantastic. So it's all fun working with these people. And that's why, like right now, Billy, when she was like, I think it was like 2009, we shot this thing. We shot a music video, and Billy played Little Death. And she came and she was the spirit of death at a party where a woman has been roofied and raped and dies from an overdose. So it was really great, and I always kind of knew. I always knew Billy was going to be something. I always knew Finney was going to be something. You kind of know talent. I've got a long career of seeing talent and trying to like develop talent, help talent out, and because it's exciting, it's fun to see where they're going to go. And I'm
yeah,
really proud of those guys. I think they're great. They were fucking nuts, man, living next door. It's crazy. But so we've got this special on, and it's the making of the video. And there's a lot of cool behind the scenes stuff with Billy and her dad. And it's like little Billy, little death Billy. and it's great, and it's up there. It's free. It's playing like at least twice a day on American Horror Classic right now. I'm going to keep it playing twice a day all the way through the rest of the week, and then I'm going to bring it back for Christmas. You know what I mean? Around Christmas, I'll be playing that because I figure there's a lot of people that want to see it. And
Oh yeah.
American Horror Classic is free. It's the new channel that we're doing, so we've got 2 channels, and I love it, dude. I love doing it. I love doing it. And you should know this. You've heard me talk about this. Long in development has been the Americans Film Festival television show.
Right.
So that's something I'm looking to bring to fruition next year.
So I want to backtrack a little bit to you're watching the show, people are watching the show, and all of a sudden you see your work up there. It's, been molested. What was your next step? Because I've had issues with Netflix in the past, with certain properties that I had. And a friend of mine had once told me, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep on creating, or do you want to sue Netflix? Which was an interesting piece of advice. So, what was going through your head, and what were some next steps for you?
Well, I already sued Marvel and beat them, so I already kicked Marvel's ass. Uh, I had a protest march on my house. I was on CNN headline news all day. And when I was on the news all day, what did I do? Did I leave town? No, we had a SWAT truck there. I had a party fence. A lot of my friends from the bar I bounced at showed up. A lot of my punk rock friends showed up. A lot of my friends, martial arts friends showed up. And a lot of my comic book supporters showed up. My little brother was there. And we had a band, Third Stone from Champaign-Urbana. And we
Hmm.
had a barbecue. I had a barbecue with a keg. And I'm just like, no, I refuse to allow you to rattle me. I refuse. So we just made a circus of it because we understood it was a circus. We understood that the book wasn't a threat to anybody. We knew what was in the book, and all my
Yeah.
people knew. And one of the great pieces of footage we have from the protest march is a bunch of the police officers that were there are all sitting around the keg. Now they ain't drinking; they're on the job, but they're
Hmm.
reading the books. They're reading the Dahmer book to see
Yeah.
what free speech are they defending. And I failed to see anything offensive in there. And so you ask about the Netflix thing. Well,
Hmm.
as a person who's been to court as often as I have, you understand in life that there are times where you have to defend something like your legacy. You have to defend your rights as a creator because if you don't defend it this time, it's easier to get you next time. And
Hmm.
that's the nature of trademark and copyright. It's why
Yeah.
Disney will sue a grade school for having Mickey on the side of the school, because American copyright and trademark law makes you defend your copyrights and trademarks vociferously. So my first inclination has been get a motherfucking lawyer. Let's see what they say. Because you could get mad, you could get whatever, but it's better to talk to a lawyer. But I've already been to court over this issue many times. I
Yeah.
had to sue a filmmaking partner who sold my movie behind my back, and I had to send out cease and desist notices to all the distributors, and I had to deal with that. I went through bankruptcy court in the year 2000. Dealing with the crash and burn of the comic book industry at the end of the 90s. The collapse of the direct distribution system. That's a story for
Yeah.
a different day. But these things are all things I've got so much experience with court. And then also, once you've been in a court case where you're testifying and you're a key witness and you're looking at the guy who raped and murdered your girlfriend, it's a lot easier to sue Netflix. It's a lot
Right.
easier. It's actually a no-brainer for me because they're my competition. Netflix is
Hmm.
literally my competition. Do I think small? No, I'm big. We had 8 million viewers last year. We're coming up on their tail because people are mad. People feel like they're being milked. People feel like their time is being wasted. And
Hmm.
frankly, their product is watered down. And they've insulted a lot of artists. And there are a lot of lawsuits going on with Netflix. And they have not been paying their creators properly. As I understand it, this is an opinion. But as I understand it, that there were several issues with major unions. And I know filmmakers and I won't be throwing anybody under the bus because they made their public statements.
Yeah.
So these filmmakers who have worked with Netflix have said publicly, hey, guys, we need you to buy our Blu ray. because we won't make any money off this Netflix deal.
Yeah.
And they've been using their archaic deals from previous business deals to leverage as like independent filmmakers, but they're not independent filmmakers. They're on level with, they're trying to be on level, and one could say they might be with like Disney, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that's a big part of why Disney bought Star Wars. I think that's a big part of why, you know, I've said this in a lot of my interviews, and okay, I'm kind of known for influencing leaders, and there's a lot of people that follow me. There's a lot of people with a lot of money that follow what I have to say because I'm a very intelligent man and I really know my market. And I used to get paid money in the advertising industry for my opinion. So I'm used to people paying me money for my marketing opinions and my opinions about how do you break into the American market, about poetry, all kinds of stuff like that, about the First
Hmm.
Amendment. So I've been a public speaker for a long time on these subjects and issues, and rolling with Alki David over at Film On, you know, a legitimate billionaire and heir to the Coca-Cola bottling empire. Uh, I learned a lot working with Alki and being amongst all those wealthy folks, and like Glenn Danzig, you know, I got to start working with Glenn when Glenn's career really took off. You know, I got to watch that. I got to watch it for Ronda Rousey. You know,
Hmm.
when I didn't really know Ronda that well, I became friends with her mother over at the dojo at Gokor's Hayastan Academy. And I got to watch what happened to her, to her family, in my dojo, and to see what that kind of explosion of talent and hyper success does. You know what I mean? And I had a
Yeah.
really good perspective for that one. And then the thing with Glenn is, you know, now I've known Glenn a long fucking time. You get what I mean? And you're privy to meetings that the public isn't. There's a lot of non-disclosure agreements signed, and you got to honor them. You're a professional. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I've got a lot of good deals cooking, and I'm very excited about them. But I've got non-disclosure agreements. I can't blab it all out. I got to wait till it's the appropriate time
Right.
to announce.
So, what's going on with the Big Book of Dahmer, and what are some of the expectations? What are we looking to see with the Big Book of Dahmer as far as the audience?
Well, to tell you the truth, that book is brings up so many conflicted emotions with me. All the Dahmer books, and it's from this flashpoint area of my life. But mastering the material out, because I've been doing it personally. I've been scanning all the artwork in. I've been correcting the artwork and making it look sweet. Because I'm a prima donna when it comes to my work, and if you understand, you're a director. I want my color correction to be right. It's got to be
Yeah.
right. My fans are paying money for this. They've been waiting for this for a long time. So I must make sure I deliver the goods. And going through the Dahmer book, it's damn good. I'm really proud of it. And what is collecting all 4 issues together. And there's a gentleman named Ethan Van Sciver who has been involved in like different censorship issues and different political issues in comic books. And he
Hmm.
does a book called Cyberfrog.
Yeah.
And I used to buy Cyberfrog in the 90s. I liked it. I used to buy Don Chin's radioactive mutant hamsters. You know, I
Right.
used
Yeah.
to buy the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, all of them. I know Kevin. You know, and so I'm a freak for my comics, and I liked Cyberfrog, and I was really happy to see it was back and seeing how successful he'd been on the crowdfunding. And he's I've been on his show once, and it was great. It was good. It was a good spirited conversation. I like that. And he's writing the epitaphs. If you are a long-term Boneyard Press reader, or if you're a fan from the old days, I used to always write the epitaphs. That was my editorial. So Ethan is writing an editorial because he feels I'm the original Comicsgate guy, which is their whole thing, is that's their controversy is Comicsgate. And so when we talked about it, I had a hard time wrapping my head around it, but then I was listening to him in an argument with somebody on a different show, and they were going back and forth, and I'm like, yeah, it's censorship, it's First Amendment issues, and it's misrepresentation of your work for somebody else to artificially aggrandize themselves. So yeah, and it's a lot of lies, a lot of distortion and misrepresentation of the truth
Hmm.
for somebody else's gain, for Sally Jesse Raphael to sell them commercials because we're gonna have this terrible man is gonna make these victims' families, mothers cry, even though we flew them in. We put them up. We put them in a hotel. We fed them backstage. We
Yeah.
told them to stick to their guns. Then we sat them right next to you, and we know you're going to upset them, but we're going to make a lot of money when you upset
Oh
them.
yeah.
You're going to upset them, but we're going to make a lot of money. So Hart, for the love of God, just be that bad guy we need you to be. For the love
Come
of
sit
God,
with
we
us
need
at
to sell that orange
3 p.m.
juice.
Central, and you can be angry too.
What was that?
Come sit with us at 3 p.m. Central, and you could be angry with us too.
Yeah, right.
It's rabble rousing, right? I mean, in a
It is.
sense.
It's a manipulation, and so it's having old wounds ripped apart when you see that Netflix special, because I really felt that my inclusion or my comics being included in the special was kind of, I don't know, petty, personal. It didn't seem like it drove the narrative, and it seemed like an attempt to swipe my piece of history away from me. It just seemed really, really, I don't know, petty and
Yeah.
unprofessional. That's really a big one, unprofessional. But there are a lot of
Hmm.
folks that were very unhappy with how the producer behind this has run his productions, and I don't need to get into that. Uninterested in that. I'm happier with. I'm really happy to. Okay, it's weird because everybody's been wanting me to reprint these Dahmer books, man. And I've resisted it for 30 years. I could have done this 20 years ago. I could have done this 10 years ago. And I really resisted it. But once I feel like Netflix made me do this now. And I felt like
Hmm.
I had to do it now, because the only way for somebody to know that they're lying about me is if they have access to the product. So I need to make the
Yeah.
product available. And that's why I'm doing the Indiegogo campaign right now. And that's why I got a really good forensics expert, a man who works with writing programs for convicts and for cops. David Hayes is writing the introduction of this. This dude has got a ton of slew of degrees, and I'm taking this very seriously, and we're reprinting all the original stuff. Nothing's being altered, nothing's being censored, nothing's being banned. And it's about 154 pages at this point in time. We got some cool pinups. This weekend, we are adding a bunch of limited edition, signed edition perks to the campaign on Indiegogo. And it's Hart Fisher's Big Book of Dahmer. And so I'm adding cool stuff as it's coming in, because as I've done the project, I've been shocked at how many people want to be a part of it. Thank you, Andrew. Great alternative
Well,
cover by this amazing artist who's done a lot of work with Dynamite and DC. Andrew, I'm still learning his last name. Andrew Mangum, and his
okay.
son did this team up cover of me, kind of old school '90s style image, ripping Jeffrey Dahmer apart with my bare hands in hell. And so that's our signed limited edition, which is going to be available this weekend. So
Nice.
it's been kind of interesting who's bringing what to the table.
So you had mentioned going back, and now I always find it weird, from a person who did art a long time ago, and then I've had these, we all go sort of epochs in our life where we're focused on something, and we focus on something else. But going back and looking at stuff that represented a span of a year or a span of 2 years or 3 years, it's a very strange feeling. It always has been for me, sort of revisiting that. So was it an emotional sort of journey for you too, going back through a lot of this and, and,
Oh
and
yeah.
trying to get it back to the public?
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's difficult because, like, right now I have a first print Jeffrey Dahmer unauthorized biography book for sale, and I found it sitting in the drawer of comics that my mom kept, and it's been sitting in that drawer at my mother's house, my late mother, and it's been there since March 1992, and that's a trip to go through that, and it's very touching, and I'm still wrapping my brain about her being gone.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's super emotional because they supported me. My parents really supported me when I went through that time. And because during all this controversy over these books, and like the people, some of the victims' families knew on some of these talk shows, and some of the people in the audience knew that my girlfriend had been raped and murdered. And
Mm,
so your narrative falls apart if your audience is told, I'm this insensitive villain. If only he had lost a loved one, he'd never write these terrible, terrible books. And that
right.
was their narrative. But the reason I wrote the book is because throughout my life, I have lost loved ones. So I feel the works are all very honest. I found that the Dahmer biography book was far more passionate and better written than I remember it. And that's the benefit of, I'm going to call it professional distance, because not only did I
Mhm.
have the distance of years, I've I wrote that work in 1991 at the beginning of my career.
Yeah.
And so now, you as a professional are a far different person because you've been up for me. I've been an ad man. I've been a voiceover guy. Have been a director. I've been an actor. I've been a spoken word performer for actually it's 2022. I've been a spoken word performer for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I've sung in bands, and I've sung music, and I've produced scores, and I've worked with all these different amazing people. So I'm a far different creator than I was, and I have an adult eye. I have a practiced eye, so it's automatic. I read it. It doesn't matter if it's mine. If it's mine and it sucks, it still sucks,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's been pretty cool, and I'm really excited to see what people think of this stuff. And everybody out there is really thrilled. And then I'm really, because okay, Dahmer kind of took precedent over me finishing Bill because of the Netflix special, because of their negative portrayal. I felt it's the same reason I went on those talk shows. My work is being maligned. My work is being misrepresented. The work of my artist who did great, great work is being shat upon. And I feel I have to get out there and defend ourselves as creators and the quality of what we're doing. That's the big thing, is to do that, is to defend that. And that's why I have to do it. It jumped the gun on everything. The next thing I was going to do was Babylon Crush after Bill was done. I want to do Babylon around Christmas,
Mhm.
because I thought I'd be done with Bill. But this Netflix thing, and actually I have been talking to lawyers. Why wouldn't you sue Netflix? Why not? If they're intruding on your work, if you don't, then other producers are going to see that as weakness. And so when you get your shot at MGM, when you're negotiating your contract with FX, that's when you're going to get taken advantage of, because they're going to go, oh, we convinced him to play ball for the goodness of his career with Netflixy.
Mhm.
Okay, rapist behavior, guys. It
Yeah.
isn't something that changes, okay? The Harvey Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein, Harvey Weinstein, you get me? And so
Mhm.
there are people that enable that behavior. There are people that you might suspect that behavior, but it is hard to go out and make an accusation like that unless you got something really concrete. You can't just say, well, I heard this. You have to really
Right.
know
Yeah.
something. You have to really know something, because it's such a dangerous thing to throw around. And these guys to market things to distract, in my career and in my life, my friends and my family, and a lot of like my girlfriends, like my wife. She's like, Hart, they're just projecting on you. Like when they portray you as this terrible, terrible person, they're just preying upon you. They're using you as the artificial. They're projecting what they're doing upon you, and you're the guy that is small enough that they feel safe enough to do that to. They didn't do it to
Yeah.
Brad Pitt. They did it to me. So for them, it's almost like a no-brainer. Like, well, why wouldn't they? They need a villain, something to distract. So everybody, it's that whole, don't look at this hand. It's all about them WMDs in Iraq. We got to go get them WMDs out
Yeah.
of Iraq. You get me? It's the
Oh, yeah.
Gulf of Tonkin. We got to go aggressive Gulf of Tonkin.
Yeah.
We got to go. We sent all our bullets to the Ukraine. So now we got to make new ones. We got a shortage. We sent all our old bullets. Now we need a new military contract to make new bullets, goddammit, because we need more fucking bullets.
Yeah.
It's such a shuck and jive, bro. Oh
You
my
know,
God.
they're shuffling the same deck, but as soon as they discard, it goes to the bottom of the pile. It's never ending.
Okay, look at Las Vegas. Come on. It's a cheater's paradise. We don't want, we know you're going to get some hookers, but we don't want you to really do it publicly. And oh, by the way, while you're making major financial decisions, we're going to give you a drug that is going to loosen up your inhibitions. And also, we're going to give it to you for free. And it's going to make it more difficult for you to count or
Yep.
focus or pay attention to all this money you're losing to us. So how can that be like, how can that even be legal?
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
insane.
it's a three-ring circus.
Yeah, so that's why they need a straw man. That's why you need the sacrificial virgin. You need the guy who looks the role that you can cast in the role. And I think that's why they were kind of, I honestly think they were terrified to mention my name in the special because they're afraid that it'll lead back to me and they'll go, wow, that
Yeah.
dude's cool. Man, I like that guy's work. Oh man, those comic, I could get that comic. So I think there's been like a little bit of a shadow banning happening. Like I know
Mhm.
Billie Eilish's handlers do not want me talking to the public. They're
Right.
terrified about what I might say. I ain't gonna be mean, guys. Calm down. I ain't gonna be mean. I like those kids.
So a couple things that I want to get to is, first of all, for people who are not familiar with the original book, people who want to donate to the Indiegogo, what can people expect if they have no familiarity with the books?
Well, it's a grab bag because one, the media has completely misrepresented the book to you. So you're going to get the original introduction and the original biography book. You're going to get all of the pages, at least 24 pages of story from the original infamous bio book that they photoshopped their own actor over our artwork onto, but left all my logos on. Good job, guys. Left all the Boneyard Press markings on,
Yeah.
so it looks like it's my book, but it's yeah, okay. Nice job, fellas. So now, because of your actions, I'm bringing the books out. I'm bringing them back into print. So instead of doing, single issues, we're collecting all four of the Dahmer books into one big volume. It's black and white. It's going to be printed on some pretty decent paper because I'm always picky about my books. I want to be able to read my book, and when they read it, they're gonna get a quick down and dirty bio on the Dahmer case.
Mhm.
Then they're going to get some background on what starts happening from back then. Some original editorials that were written back then, some behind the scenes photos from the protest march. So when I mentioned like we're grilling and we got the police reading these books around, the SWAT team is reading them
Right.
around the keg. We've got all those photographs. So all of my supporters are there, and we're in the house where I shot my movie, The Garbage Man. And that's another
Mhm.
really thing is if you go to the Indiegogo, Hart Fisher's Big Book of Dahmer campaign on Indiegogo, we have as an add-on my original film, The Garbage Man, which was conceived of and shot during this whole time in Champaign, Illinois. So the house where the protest march happened, that's the house we shot The Garbage Man in, where all that took place at. So a lot of the people involved in The Garbage Man are there. A lot of the bands, we had The Third Stone is there, and we got photos of the band playing at the protest march. And it's one of those things where you're going to be able to feel like you were in the moment of this
Yeah.
outlaw event in the 90s, and it's black and white, and you're going to have some different authors give their perspective on why this is important. We have some alternative pinups. We have a bunch of alternative covers. Like one of the things we're doing for the alternative covers is okay, we've got the original, the bio cover, which is the one that they photoshopped. Then
Mhm.
there is the young Jeffrey Dahmer cover with a young Dahmer with a chainsaw and a Budweiser hat, and I drew that cover. Then there is Dahmer Zombie Squad edition, and all the books have these are the alternate covers because I know people want this. And then there's the Jeffrey Dahmer versus Jesus Christ cover, which is a wraparound cover, and that was featured in the Netflix special. And for some odd reason, they photoshopped that one too. Don't know. And they did in a weird way. Like, okay, Jesus is getting like punched in the face, right, by Dahmer, and his hair is like flying all over, and Jesus had long hair, right? So they photoshopped it so his hair was shorter. It looked way more like a Jufro. You know what I mean? I don't know why they did that. And then they photoshopped
So just
like the
some
cross.
weird decisions across the board.
Yeah, and they photoshopped the cross from the front of his boxing shorts to the side of his boxing shorts. I don't even know why they fucking did that, but it's all still my work. So it's
Right, yeah.
really weird. Like, okay, imagine someone took your movie, the Sean Miller story, and they took your film and they photoshopped in different actors into it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
they did their own voiceover, so it's their voice over the lead guy, or it's like what what
I think it
what?
it just stinks of, like, way too many, quote, "marketing professionals" in a room, and they don't quite know the difference between spitballing and pulling the trigger, and suddenly they're just making a lot of busy work and making some
David
weird
Hayes,
decisions.
David said that they need me as the villain in here. You've got the Dahmer guy, but you also need the other bad white man outside. You
Yeah,
also need the other bad guy, and they wanted to avoid anybody hearing what I had to say because I'm going to wreck their narrative. That's something they've learned. They want to portray my work in a certain way, but if people actually talk to me, and in this day and age, anybody can search my name and read my Wikipedia, and they could read about all the stuff I've been through and different things I've accomplished. Not everything, but it's a start. And you could see me on IMDb. You could find me on AmericanHorrors.net. You could find it then, and they lose control of the narrative. So they're trying to control the narrative, so they have a marketable bad guy, and
yeah,
that's been the notion of this ever since I started. Ever since this thing first happened, is feeling this feeling of being hijacked, of being ambushed, of being completely misrepresented, completely lied about.
yeah.
And so that's kind of their game though. That's what they do. And now I've gotten a lot better at dealing with it, handling it. And when you've got a 30-year career, it's a little trickier to lie about me. And that's why they
Right.
don't have my name in the show. I think that's why they're trying to make it harder to identify. You know what I mean? What do
Mhm.
you think?
Well, again, I think there's this insistence to perpetuate anger. So if we have a point in the film where we start, or the series where we start portraying one character, even if it's under a slightly sympathetic light, even looking at Dahmer as a person who obviously was, bereft of major psychological issues. If at some point that starts to have our audience too much sympathy, we don't have them angry enough. We need to get them angry again. And that just seems to be something that I see in almost every aspect of media right now, is that we have to have something to keep people angry. We have to
Mm-hmm.
have some object, some person. We can't have anything where we might unify under one theme. Let's keep
Mm-hmm.
them angry. Let's keep them divided. And it just
Mm-hmm.
seems and I think it's worked so well in the past, to some degree, that, it's just they just can't get away from it. We've got to find something to make them a little bit angry. And I think it's a weird sort of I think after a while, instead of it being conventional storytelling, like I don't I think when you get to a production like Dahmer or a lot of Netflix's productions, I don't think it's entirely a creative venture anymore. I
I've
think it's an
I've heard
exercise in
stories about.
marketing.
Have you heard stories from your creative friends that have worked with Netflix? Have you heard about their process? Like, have you anybody talked about it?
Yes. Yeah.
And we don't have to give up details. So we just say like, hey, because okay, for the people at home who don't understand, when we as creators, when we do a lot of these shows and when we do talk shows and stuff, there's a lot of stuff where you'll be backstage and you'll go over stuff like, hey, is there something you want me to stay away from on the show? Is there something we can't talk about legally on the show, but we could talk about backstage? And so that's part of the professionalism of entertainment. You start to understand there's a story the public doesn't know. There's things
Yeah.
the public doesn't know. There's experiences that we cannot share because of these non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah. Well, and
And being a
sometimes
professional. Being a professional. Like I haven't signed a ton of non-disclosure agreements with Glenn, but I just feel it's professional for me to maintain the confidences that he gave me when I worked with him and when I got to hang out with him and be a friend of him.
yeah, and I sort of approach things the same way. Um, I wanna keep everything, above the board. I wanna keep everything I I like the people that I associate myself with, and I wanna continue to associate myself with them. So
Well,
you want to do
this
right
is
by
kind
them.
of a feeling business. You're a director, and you actually were acting in your film, so you're directing and acting. So you kind of get the groove of a lot of filmmaking is a feeling, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's a momentum, and sometimes it has its ebbs and flows. And I feel that's kind of happened with this Dahmer story. It's just kind of had its ebbs and flows, and I think it worked for me that I never reprinted it.
Hmm.
It made it more mysterious.
Yeah. But I think, what we were talking about earlier, and I do think that after a while, when people cease to look at a creative venture as a story, they
Mhm.
cease to look at it as, I've got a story that I want to get out. I've written something that I enjoy. I want to see it visualized. I want this thing to be born. And I think that when we start looking at studios that throw around money in the excess of 20, 30, 40, $50 million, I think that entire creative process is completely different. And instead of it being, we've got a vision, we've got a story, we've got things that we want to see, we've got things we want other people to see, it becomes, let's take a look at our demographics, let's take a look at our numbers, let's take a look at our 18 to 35, let's write for this group, and
Well,
let's put
you're
it on
you're
at
absolutely
this
correct.
time.
That's why $100 million rock movie with Dwayne Johnson is so micromanaged because we have to be honest. That's a substantial amount of money, and we as filmmakers, if you're just a selfish cock and you just devour your producer's money and waste their time and throw them under the bus so you could have your artistic moment, you're not a professional. You're kind of an asshole, and that's
Yeah.
part of the entertainment business is having respect for the money that you have for your movie, respecting the investment of the people that backed your vision. And sometimes that means you got to listen to them. Not like do what they say, but you
Right.
should consider what they have to say. You should give it honest consideration. Sometimes like, no, that's not that idea won't work. But it's a big thing in this industry, and you and I both know we are now in the post-COVID filmmaking world. We are now in there's a there's a lot less people in the world. There's a lot less
Yeah.
people out there. People are more afraid to go to a movie theater. Movie theaters are in a crisis, and I believe theater going is the core of the filmmaking experience. I
Yeah.
think going and seeing because I had this experience. Okay, your movie was vastly different when I watched it in the submission process on my home theater system. Right? It's
Hmm.
good. It's not. It ain't like I'm fucking got my own theater at home. I don't. So, but it's okay. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And when I saw it in 4 fucking K on the big screen at the Imagine Theater Group in Lake Geneva, I was whoa. I had the same experience with Girl Next, which was our
Mm.
midnight movie.
Hmm.
And sure, I'd seen it. In fact, I was dreading seeing it because some of these rapey, I'm gonna kidnap the girl and keep her in my basement and torture her and sexually molest her movies. I mean, that gets under my skin as a guy who's had several of his loved ones raped. Uh,
Yeah.
so sometimes that's pretty creepy crawly for me. And so I was very hesitant to watch that film. And then me and my buddy watched it, Trike, and it was pretty damn good. It was pretty damn good. But then when I saw it on the big screen in 4K, oh my god, oh my god, it was like you gotta go see this on the big screen.
Right.
Oh my
Yeah.
god. And same with like Bad Candy, Scott
Oh yeah.
Hansen, Desiree.
Hmm.
Well, I believe it's now Desiree Hansen. They got married. They did this great movie, Bad Candy, a horror anthology. It was so good in 4K on the big screen. You get what I mean? So I
Oh yeah.
really believe that like live music, live events, us going to see comedies together, us going to see horror films together makes the experience richer and better.
Well, there's something not only communal about it, but there's something very old and ancient about this ritual of shared experience.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of getting away from it. And I think we're getting away from it in a sense where, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I like the convenience of being able to pause a movie and take a piss, for example.
Well,
Like I
that's the
like
problem
that
with American
convenience.
horrors. If
But
you're watching, I'm gonna bring you home a tip about American horrors. For some reason, we recently revamped the website. We launched the second channel this summer. It was tough. We had a lot of tech problems. But if you watch American Horrors on AmericanHorrors.net, you can pause it. It'll
And
pause.
like again,
We don't
I
know why.
love
Me and
the
my tech are like, dude, did you see? Like, did you do that on purpose? I didn't do that on purpose. How the fuck? How,
so this is just an
how the fuck
incidental
is it
product.
pausing?
Yeah, I like
It's
the ability to do that. I mean,
magic.
I think we all sort of do, but at the same time, being a child of the '70s, child of the '80s, when you would see something, for example, that was only on TV seasonally,
Mhm.
it could have been a half-hour program or a 2-hour film. You had a finite window of seeing this, this film or this movie, and it was the same way in the theaters, which is why you see a lot of these wide re-releases of a lot of Spielberg films, for example. We would see
Mhm.
E.T. come back, and it would become number 1 again for another 13 weeks.
Yeah. And I
And
do that with American Horrors. Like, okay, for me, we did a thing for Christmas one year. It was a satanic Black Christmas. It was all satanic films all day long on Christmas.
right.
Or one of my favorites was for Thanksgiving. I do this on a regular basis. For Thanksgiving, I load the week up with cannibal films,
Well, of
zombie
course, yeah.
films, anything involving eating flesh. I load up the schedule, and there's a lot of shit I won't play until it's Thanksgiving, and then I'm
Yeah.
I'm only going to play Terror on the Menu then.
I mean, we're only really talking turkeys anyways, Art.
Oh no! And that was the
So
fun thing about the Dahmer thing, and part of why I felt I'm like, okay, so Netflix came out with their series. 196 million people saw it in the very first week of its streaming, and I felt also I knew that Jeffrey Dahmer is is murdered in November. So
mhm,
I thought, being a cheeky monkey, I have to jump on this now. I got to deal with this while it's trending. I got
yeah.
to deal with this while it's out and it's relevant to the culture. Because you and I know the culture is different now. It's like zing,
Oh, yeah.
zing, zing.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to get it in time for Thanksgiving because the cannibal thing.
Of course, yeah.
If you're all in, you're all in, man. And I try to be nice with the biography book, and that's why I did the spoof books later because the victim's family sued me, and so I was a kid right out of college, and I was a bouncer at a bar, and I didn't have any money. I was publishing comic books. We weren't
Mhm.
making a lot of money, and then they accused me. Like Thomas Jacobson will accuse me in the Larry King clip. And he goes, "Well, you said you made money, but then you didn't make money." Yeah, because I had to pay a lawyer in court. So any money I made off of this book, it went to the
Right.
lawyer that you caused me to have to hire. And I wouldn't have done the book if it wasn't for you guys.
Well,
Because I wouldn't have needed a fucking lawyer.
there are
I wouldn't
people
need a fucking lawyer. So I wouldn't have done another goddamn Dahmer book if it wasn't for you fucking guys.
but you're also dealing with people too that have such vast amounts of expendable income that they don't understand that even when creative people make money off of a product, a lot of that money goes to living. It goes to creating new art. We're dealing with people that they have no idea of what it's like to be a working artist or a blue collar artist.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, here's an example. It's real simple. Okay, guys. That first Dahmer bio book was a cover price of 250, right? So it's 250. So you've got a book that's 250. Well, the print run was only 4,000 copies. So your book's 250. You go through distribution, so you only get 40% of cover price. Okay, so you're only getting 40% of that cover price. You got to pay your print costs. You had to pay the guy who drew it. You had to pay the guy that painted the
Yeah.
cover. So as a filmmaker, my friend Ash, you do the math. There's not a lot of cookie left to
No,
even
there's
live
not.
off of. Even live off of. Okay.
There's about enough to lick your finger and put it on the plate and see what comes up.
Yeah. So because of the controversy, now I got to reprint the book. Okay. So now there's a
Yeah.
second printing. Oh, gee, how many copies? Well, uh, I got into a conflict with the printer because I ordered 7,000 and they printed 10 without my permission. That's a whole other story. So
Yeah.
we ended up in this conflict. So there's a print run of 10,000 copies of the second print. All right. That's still not a lot of money. To get what I
Right.
mean?
Oh yeah.
You still had to pay for the ads in the preview guides and in Capital Seminar. Capital, they were the second largest distributor. And then you had the issue of, well, frankly, during the second print, I believe that's when Capital, which was based out of Milwaukee, burned over 1,000 copies of the book.
Mm.
How do you fight that, man? How do you fight when your distributor burns your book? They paid me. At least I was paid, but they still burned it. They didn't give it
Right.
to their
Right.
stores. They didn't give it to their retailers who ordered it. So perhaps maybe that's why Capital went out of business.
So a couple things I want to get to real quick because we're at the top of the hour here, and I want to wrap a couple things up. Is first of all,
Sure.
um, the campaign's going.
Yep.
It's live.
Mhm.
Um, it's easy to search for, easy to get to under Hart Fisher's Big Book of Dahmer. Correct?
Correct. And it's affordable. Like I really worked hard with some of the people in retail and some of the people I knew in the independent crowdfunding scene. And I felt like, okay, there's a lot of tiers I'm adding this weekend. And I've been trying to make this accessible to people. It's really important. If you're an international viewer, you can get a digital edition that's very, very affordable. Okay. Because we know shipping right now is exorbitant. It's very, very
Yeah.
expensive to ship a 154-page book. Okay. And here's the thing, it's going to get shipped like twice. It's got to get shipped to me. Then I got to ship it out to you. You get what I mean? So
Oh
it's a
yeah.
double thing that's happening. And I've got the book it's all on the computer. I've been working on it, putting it together. We got a brand new alternative cover going live. We have a trading card set in the works. We have a baby bib in the works. We are giving away every once in a while we make an announcement like on Cyber Monday and over like if you ordered on Cyber Monday, you got to get a copy of the Doing Time with OJ book.
Mm.
So we try to make sure if you supported a physical perk, because we can only ship to America and Canada at this point in time. But down
Yeah.
the road, because it's crowdfunding, so I need the help of the people. I need
Yeah.
people out there to help support. Even if you don't have the money to purchase it, you could share the campaign, let people know about it. That's the best way to do this. That's the best way to help us independent creators take back our vision when a big corporate entity tries to steal the work from you, because that's what's going on here. It's a grab. They want to
Yeah.
take that history that I and my people suffered for, and they want to make it theirs without paying their dues at all.
So this is always a question that I like to ask, especially from creative professionals, because we seem to consume a lot of creative material. You know, we're
Mm-hmm,
always looking for films that we enjoy, books that
mm-hmm.
we enjoy, comics that we enjoy. Um, what's something that you've seen? This could even be music that you've heard, a book that you've read that really impressed you. Like if somebody's
Well,
looking for
one,
something new out there, this is always something that I'm very curious about.
I'm pretty hyper manic because I've got so much crazy shit going on in my life. So
Yeah.
these days, I kind of stay away from metal. I get to normally I'm like chilling. I like this band called Saint Germain, which is a lounge, ultra lounge band.
Hmm.
Uh, Bands like Thievery Corporation. I like a lot of that kind of trip hop, tricky, Massive Attack, that kind of thing, because I find that I've been through so much shit and I'm already involved in so much aggro. I kind of need to chill a little bit. You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
so I
yeah.
listen to a lot of that. I still am listening to a ton of Manowar, which is a metal band I love. Like me
Oh
and
yeah.
Max go over at Atrocity Press. We're both like, fighting the world.
And
And
the best
also
album covers of all time, Man of War.
that, and I still think Danzig's music is still really fresh. I still listen to a lot
Yeah.
of Glenn stuff, a lot of Misfits, a ton of punk rock shit. I
Hmm.
like 70s punk. I like Fear. And then as far as like books, I'm going to say like Joe Nesbo, who he wrote. People might know him from the movie The Snowman. but that's a far inferior work. These guys' novels are the Harry Hole series is fantastic. So
Hmm.
I really like Joe Nesbo. I'm a huge fan of Don Wilson, The Power of the Dog, The Cartel, Big City, or Border War, and also Frederick Forsyth. Uh, Amazing. He wrote Dogs of War, and I recommend everybody go out if you want to understand our position in the drug war. Understand that this author, Frederick Forsyth, for years denied it, but he recently came out, and it was understood that he is a uh, MI6 military spy for the British government, like James
Mm.
Bond. And so a lot of his books were a cover for him to go out and spy for the British government.
Mm.
So his books are very, very accurate. I recommend reading The Cobra and then read Power of the Dog, then read The Cartel, then read Border War, and you might look at everything around you a little bit different. Because Don Winslow's a really great writer. Uh, to me, James Ellroy's kind of spun himself out. I like earlier James Ellroy work, but I think he's kind of spun out a bit in his later years, but I love his work. For hard-boiled detective fiction, which is a passion of mine, classic Mickey Spillane, obviously.
Hmm.
Uh, Andrew Vox, who recently passed. I love that guy's work. And I would also say the horror books like John Skip, Craig Spector. They're hard to find though. Those books
Yeah.
are really hard to find. Another hard-boiled fiction would be the Lee Child series,
Mm.
Reacher. I really, because I know Lee Child, I've read that he's a comic book fan, so I wouldn't be surprised to find out if Lee Child was a big Bill the Bull fan.
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of them out there in Hollywood that I knew that were all comic nerds and comic geeks,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of parallels I feel to the Lee Child character in Bill the Bull. The Lee Child character meaning Reacher.
Yeah.
The Tom Cruise movies, forget those. Just forget them. Forget them. The books are great, especially if you can get your hands on the really early ones because they're much more. They're less actiony. I mean, if you want actiony, great. The new ones are fun, but it's much more original to discover the character from the beginning.
Right. Right. Well, again, Hart, I can't thank you enough for coming on with us, especially talking about Big Book of Dahmer, everything you've got going on right now. You have a couple moments off the air for us?
Yeah, sure.
Well, again, thanks so much. I urge everyone, please go check out the Indiegogo. I mean, not only because you can get a physical copy, you can also get the digital copy. We have a lot of people from the UK. This would be a great opportunity for them as well.
And there's access to my movie, The Garbage Man, which is a haunting, haunting serial killer drama that is much like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer,
Mm.
or I also say the Peter Green film Clean Shaven, which is a
Mm.
rare,
Yeah.
weird horror film, and it's very hypnotic. It's going to draw you in. It's been playing on American Horrors, but you can get it as an add-on. You can get it as a digital copy, and you can get it as a DVD. And also, there's an American Horror Story as an add-on, and American Horror Story is my victim story. You know, the criticism against me on a lot of these talk shows was, why don't you write the victim story? And my rebuttal was always, I think you guys need to go write that story yourselves because you know that
Mm.
better than I do. Your victim story. So
Yeah.
what an American Horror Story is mine. It's my victim story. What it was like for me to lose my loved ones, from my point of view. What it was like to be on these talk shows as the victim of violent crime, being portrayed as an insensitive asshole. And it's riveting reading, and it's there for the first time in over a decade. It's being made available, and it originally started as writing on Incol blog. So there's a lot of really cool perks and add-ons and neat stuff, and we're continuing to add stuff. So I would urge people definitely make a donation today, and even if you've only got $5, give us the thumbs up with $5.
Right. Yeah. I mean, contribute any way that you can. Also, everybody, American horrors. I mean, 24-hour horror programming that you can
Yeah.
access. I
Yep,
mean,
I've got it on in the background right now, and right now it's playing Funeral Home, which is a
oh,
great
fantastic. Yeah.
early slasher film. And these are films that I program myself. Ash and I know this, and there's a difference when you know that like Hart's watching, like Hart's. It's not like God's watching. It's like Hart Fisher's watching the channel to make sure it's playing right, to make sure the movies are going together and match and work,
Yeah.
and the commercials are funny. And we've got some really funny shit on American Horrors. We've got some funny Christmas stuff coming up. We've got some music video premieres coming up. We got the Billie Eilish special playing twice a day on American Horror's Classic, and it's free.
Well, again, check everything out that Hart has to offer right now, especially the Indiegogo. Thank you again so much, Hart. We'll talk in just a second.
Always a pleasure, Ash. Thank you for making the time for me, buddy.
Thank you.